My guest today is Daniel Vasku. Daniel is a prototyping designer for intentional communities and transformational festivals. He's also a follower of the EMF Remedy podcast. Daniel, welcome to the EMF Remedy podcast.
Hi, Keith. Exciting to be here. Yeah, I have been following your podcast right from the beginning, each
Oh,
and every.
that's great. I appreciate that. And it's been quite some time. We've been wanting to set up this conversation, so the time has finally come, and we have a lot to talk about. Um, to give people an idea of some of the things we're going to be speaking about is how you got sick from an EMF perspective, and how you're faring with that, how that's going, how you're enduring. Also, you are now the fourth person in the fourth country who has been using, actually in your case, I think it's been for quite some time, 3 years if I'm correct, the RF radiation personal protective equipment. So we'll have a chance to talk about that, and as well as off-grid living, the importance of off-grid living skills, and direct current electric usage rather than alternating current. So let's go ahead and get started with, was it Wi-Fi that made you sick? Can you tell that story?
Yeah. When we were organizing our festivals on a rural property here in New Zealand, we were struggling with really low internet speeds, like 1 megabit per second, and if we were lucky, we got three. And that was just not enough to run our point of sale systems and all the logistics. So I got really deep into it, trying to figure out how could we get internet there. And as I got a quote from a company, it was $3,000 to get a 4G system installed with a Wi-Fi mesh network. And I thought, well, I think I probably can do it myself. Well, I dove really deep, and to do it on the cheap, because I love trying to figure out how to do things on the cheap or make it simpler. And I got four routers from Linksys and put in open source firmware so that I could tweak the settings and really make the system work as a mesh network. And it took me a long time. I was busy for maybe 12, 14 hours that day because it's got so many acronyms, there's so many settings. Like I am proficient with software. I did Digital Media Academy, and I'm really comfortable with that. But respect for network engineers, it's a whole nother world. But I was sitting there with those machines on top of each other next to me, and they were all blasting Wi-Fi at me. And at the end of the day, I did feel it in my arm, like, ooh, so, ooh, that gave me a good buzz. I've got a tingling arm. But that summer, I went to go travel with my girlfriend in a bus, like an aluminium bus. And again, I had all my gadgets with me. I made sure that we got everything tethered and connected to the 4G. And I got more and more ill. I was in summer of 2012. And as we were traveling, I thought I had hay fever. I just could not figure it out. I was just feeling miserable and just worn out. And we visited a friend who was living in the middle of a forest as taking care of that block of forestry. They call them DOC, Department of Nature and Conservation in New Zealand. And he had a router in the corner where he took the antennas off. And because I was asking, do you have internet here? Because of course we were like everybody else, little internet junkies. When we come, it's like, what is the password? And he explained that he took the antennas off because he didn't like the Wi-Fi emitting through space because it affected him. He could feel it and he didn't like it. But that way he could just have limited amount of Wi-Fi and still be pretty safe in the rest of the space. And that's when it started to click. I was explaining him like, well, lately I think I've been feeling when we switch on our phones that I get these particular pains, like a needle sticking through my my head coming from the back of my skull, but I hadn't really clicked on it. But while I was explaining that, it happened. I actually got that pain stab, and I went outside to our truck and asked my girlfriend, did you just switch on your phone? And she's like, yeah, a minute ago. And that was the first moment where I really linked it together and it started all to make sense. But honestly, I think in the first 2 or 3 years, I was sort of in a denial of it. Even though I knew it, I was always thinking, "Oh, well, yeah, but I mean, yeah," especially because everybody around me was absolutely convinced that that is not possible. So, yeah, well, then, well, maybe it is in my mind. But, after how many is now probably more than 4,000 days of waking up in a new state and just accidental stuff happening where you have no control over it, but you realize, fall asleep and then wake up with incredible migraine, thinking, oh, what's going? Oh my God, I forgot to switch my phone off, or stuff like that happening. There's no way around it. It's like when people ask, how do you know it comes from that? Well, how do you know that coffee gives you a headache? Well, after you've done it 12 times and every time when you do it, you get a headache, sort of starts to dawn on you.
Yeah.
And now, after all these years, I actually know a lot more about it because there's so much information about it, and like also what I've learned so much from your podcasts is like, yeah, it all starts to fit together, and it's not just a sort of a random down the rabbit hole kind of thing. It's actually a strong body of work that's very, very physical. And so the more you learn about it, the more it starts to solidify and become real. Anyway, long, long, long answer.
No, no, that was great. So how functional are you according to most people's standards? People may be thinking, oh well, he gets a headache. Okay. Are you able to
Mm.
function in big cities? Can you work a job for a normal corporation? Or maybe you could talk about
Um,
how much dysfunction has this resulted in?
well, I have had to isolate myself basically from society. At this point, even one single Bluetooth speaker will just destroy me. It takes a little while. The real migraine sets in the next day, which is a sort of funny sort of after effect. I can go into town with full suit, look pretty much like an alien, for a max of an hour, 2 hours, and if I overstep that, then yeah, headache. It's a migraine where I can't even think, talk, hardly walk. It is incredibly debilitating. I mean, when I'm not surrounded by EMF, like in the situation that I've created for myself here, I'm just sparkly myself, and I don't even think about it. I'm really just a happy being, and pretty much every day I wake up with this new state of being. It's just sometimes you get whacked on the nose by not being, attentive to any changes in your surroundings. It might be that a person has showed up you're so happy to see, but didn't realize that they had their phone. And oh, actually, this is a good example. I'm at home where I've got everything shielded and I'm safe. I feel relaxed. And a friend came and first thing I asked, do you have your phone on you? No, no, I know about your condition. Of course, I left it in the car. Lovely. Come in. Let's have a cup of tea. And 15, 20 minutes in, when we're talking, I'm starting to stutter and I'm getting brain fog. It's getting harder for me to concentrate and to get, you know, it, it's hard. I'm asking, you sure you have got nothing? But he's only got a shorts and a t-shirt. It's like, no, no, I've got nothing. And so I feel a bit shy, but do you mind if I just grab the meter? Because I feel like there's still something going on. It's like, no, absolutely. Then and the meter just whacks out. And he's like, oh, fine, it's in your pocket. He grabs these little AirPods,
Yeah.
in his hand. They're these, yeah, these little innocuous little things, just doing a little Bluetooth,
Yeah.
cause me to stutter and lose my being. And I think that is really the sad. It's not just having a headache; it's losing myself, my own identity, my being. You know, we all are individuals. We all have a mind, and when you start to lose that, that's like, what is there to live for? And it takes away all the joy and reason for that. And especially if, for me, that contrast is very, very big. And it has meant that I've had to move into a situation where I am basically living in a little valley, a little dip in a caravan, with pretty good cold, and in a very primitive situation. My range is just in that little valley, so sort of 50 meters around. That's where I can move. As soon as I go up, I get affected by the cell towers. As soon as I would go in a car, or I can't go visit friends, I can't go to parties, can't go to a cinema, a cafe, go get a pizza, just having fun and being alive. It's nuts. Put on your suit, go out there, do your thing, and it's like keeping your breath and get the hell out of there again. And I mean, I do enjoy having some talk and conversations, and we need human connection. It's like that's why I have been involved in transformational festivals, and that is why I give all my life energy to communities. I think we, as cute little human monkeys, are destined and programmed to be in connection with others. And as soon as we can't, it's felt, it's heartfelt. And the funny thing is, to compensate for that, I am using technology so that I can actually still have some connection, but I have to be very particular in how I implement the technology, because it's very hard not to succumb to all these electromagnetic fields, because aside from RF, there's all these low frequencies, and I've been figuring out ways to really bring it down to almost nothing, so that I can actually talk with you like this here now.
Yeah. I so much agree with what you're saying about the need for community. And we, as survivors, we have to do things sometimes that put us away from that community, because unfortunately, in the present age, people don't understand the danger of wireless technology. So I so much understand and feel empathy, because the exact same thing happens to me that you described. When I get in the presence of synthetic radiation, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, cell phones, baby monitors, any of that kind of stuff, I can't think anymore. And I'm increasing in my resilience. So, whereas before I could only go for 2 minutes in the presence of a cell phone, I did an hour and a half meeting about 2 months ago, and it was excruciating. The meeting was, they had one member wasn't there, so somebody took out a smartphone and put that down on the desk. I was sick for 3 whole days following that.
Uh,
And I was good and I was attentive for an hour, and after that my brain was just mush. And it's like you said, it removes who you are and who you can be. For me, it puts me in a sympathetic nervous system state, so I begin to get short, with people, and
yeah.
that's not me. And I can't remember things. I would, if you told me a telephone number, I wouldn't be able to, when I'm in that state, to retain it. So, and yet you and I were perfectly functional in the natural electromagnetic environment, provided the Earth came with one of these things. So yeah, I really understand what you're saying there about the community and
Mm.
the level of dysfunction that's possible. And of course, this precludes sort of normal employment for most people now. because there is this expectation that you carry a cell phone with you and actually have it enabled, like turned on, which is an impossibility for me, probably for you as well. And I should mention, for people, I should have mentioned this at the beginning. We have a little time zone difference between you and I. It is tomorrow morning in your area relative to where I am right now. So you're in New Zealand, and I'm in the, like I like to say, the majestic inland Northwest, about 50 miles from the Canadian border in the state of Idaho. So, unfortunately, what that means is I can't go see your place. I would love to, but it sounds like what you've found, what you've been able to identify, is what I call that wrinkle in the earth. And it sounds exactly like what I encourage people to try to find. It's the only lasting protection that any of us have against terrestrial sources of RF radiation. No matter how many antennas they put up, they won't be able to, in an area that has terrain, they won't be able to radiate everything. So it sounds like you're in a little bit of a dish. And then as long as you're in there, you're perfectly safe from the RF radiation. And a lot of people can't find that. There are entire states in the United States that are, as flat as as flat as can be, and there are no terrain features. So it's really a blessing that you're able to live where you live. And then you mentioned your protection suit. Is it 3 years you've been using that now?
Yeah, yeah, a bit more almost. Yeah, yeah. Got that. It's actually something I got off AliExpress. It's a boiler suit, and I like this one particularly because it's quite it's quite tough. It's made with stainless steel fiber, and I I made this veil. So it's a silver mesh, or it's a synthetic mesh with a silver coating on it, and it won't last as long. It's good to look through and to be able to breathe through. Um, but it's very delicate, so I probably get a year out of it, and I need about two square meter, and that's whatever, almost $100 or so. Um, so it is an expensive consumable in that sense, but it's pretty effective. But a funny thing that I noticed with it is that it does help to shield from the RF, so I don't get these headaches, but I do get sort of a weird jitter. It is like I've had too much coffee, so my muscles are a little bit all jittery, and I feel jittery. It's quite an intense experience.
Let's
And
let's
if
talk let's talk a little bit about that. What do you think is causing that? Have you tried wearing the suit in an area that doesn't have any RF?
Yes, 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 yes. Well, not exactly a suit, but this was before I had a suit. I went to go visit a what do you call it? A rainbow festival. It's like a hippy dippy gathering of people, and they leave all their tech behind and just come and make food together, and gather every day around a fire that burns for a month. And I thought, well, heck, I never had time for that. I was always too busy, and I might as well do it because it does sound very nice. And what I generally do before I go anywhere is I check out the topographical map. I check out the cell phone coverage through the websites of the different phone companies, so I get a bit of an estimation. And this was just really in a valley with far away, 30 kilometers away from the nearest cell tower, with absolutely no reception. At that point, I was suffering quite a bit because where I was living was just this low level of exposure constantly. So whenever I was outside, even though it was, by normal standards, city standards, really low, maybe 2, 3 microwatts per square meter. But, I could only take a few hours a day. So I was forced to be inside a lot. And then whenever I would go outside to do a bit of more work, which is really nice and invigorating, it would knock me out. So I went on a holiday basically to this rainbow gathering in this valley. And one night I got caught out that I was at even deeper into the bush where we were staying the night with a little group of people around a campfire. And I thought, well, no problem. I've got this little mylar sheet with me that I had tucked away. It's one of those emergency blanket, the silver foil,
Yeah.
which I normally have for me to create an instant protection to RF, which is quite effective, cheap way
Yeah.
to do that. So I slept in that. And the next day when I woke up, I had this same feeling exactly as if I was overexposed to Wi-Fi. And the only way that I could piece it together was like because I was in this cocoon of a RF reflective sheet, it was actually bouncing back my body on electrical fields because our heart has quite a big electrical field. I've heard 2, 3 feet, I've heard 7 feet, but it's an electric pulse. Sharks can pick up on it, and when it bounces back, that to me is then sort of an echo chamber, and that would also explain why I get so jittery when wearing the suit, because it's just my own body reflecting inside and being stuck in this echo chamber.
Yeah,
Still better than having the RF from the non-native radiation. Rather jitter than migraine.
yes, yes, and that's not the first time that I've heard this concept that in different contexts, it might not be the sort of the beekeeper suit RF radiation. It might be like a sleep sack or something like that. But we do emanate, we do emanate a biofield. The largest component of that is, of course, coming from the heart. The second largest is coming from the brain, but there are other emanations. And evidently, that's meant to go out. And some people don't like the feeling of having that reflected right back at them. But as you mentioned, it's a lot better than being totally disabled by the synthetic radiation. At least that's natural radiation that you're being exposed to. That's produced from your body.
I think I've also gotten a lot more sensitive over time because it probably coincides with what Dr. Martin Powell says about the myelin sheet being broken down. I have a feeling that my myelin sheet has indeed deteriorated because I am so much more susceptible to electric pulses because that shield, that fatty shield around the nerves has thinned over time.
Right, yeah. And you're talking about Dr. Martin Paul. Was that who you said?
Yeah.
It
makes a lot of sense to me how he's pinpointed it, and I think a lot more people have been supporting his theory on how the voltage gated channels are flooded with calcium because of the RF pulses. You've had quite a few talks about that too. So it makes a lot of sense. I'm not a chemist or biologist, but
that makes
try to follow what's happening.
Yeah, and I wouldn't want to be not in today's world. I'm quite happy just focusing on helping people endure with the synthetic EMF situation. Now you're quite technical. You and I have talked a little bit before. You're an artist. Your background is in creating art, and what you told me one time is that you express yourself with your art through your technology. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, true. We are living in a time where my wildest dreams have come true. I mean, in '97, I was already taking apart a Wacom tablet and a TFT monitor, trying to make a digital drawing tablet. It failed. I ended up with a broken monitor, but I was really close, and I love creating with digital medium and going hybrid between that. So I've always had this very intimate relationship with computers. And when the first, proper, I always hoped that Apple would come with it, but they just didn't go down that path of actually delivering us a pen because as a graphic artist, a photographer, our interface is very limited. It's just a mouse. It's almost like an etch a sketch where you can interact with it. While audio people, they've got endless knobs and things that they can manipulate and really become one with what they're creating. So now we've gotten into this area where like the Samsung Galaxy with the Note that is wonderful pen technology, and I've been using Wacom for forever. Wacom is a drawing tablet, digital drawing tablet, which has pressure sensitivity, is very precise, and um, I think though that this very intimate relationship with technology that I had developed and this love for interacting with it made me also be too close to it. The EMR from a Wacom tablet is quite considerable, so you're bathing in that all the time. Being with my MacBook all the time, you get that sort of little electrical feeling when you're touching the wrist, and you get this rubbery feeling. It's actually a voltage surcharge. I believe it's like 109, 110 volts or something that buzzes and it's not earthed properly. So there is another plug from Apple that you can get, and then you actually have a ground, and then suddenly that is gone. But I never really linked on how bad that was. So I was always, it's almost nice how bad it feels. It's like cigarette smoking or something. Like it's bad, but sort of your body gets used to it. And I would use my laptop also to share my internet that came in through Ethernet. Like, oh, you need to be on the Wi-Fi, no problem, I'll just switch on my hotspot on my laptop, on my Apple laptop. It's a cool thing that only Apple does. No, you can't find it on a Windows, so being all geek. But in the meantime, I'm sitting there while maybe 4 or 5 people are jumping on the internet through my computer, and it's just blasting. How ignorant could I be? I feel like those people that put their shoe into an X-ray machine in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. That's how long they were in use, to put their feet in to see their toes wiggle if it's a good fit. Like, oh my God, how can we live in this way and not
Yeah,
see?
exactly.
Now I can't unsee. But yeah, I absolutely miss being like, I'm happy that I've got these monitors set up and I'm slowly starting to get closer to a computer. This is a project that's been taking more than a year of slowly, step by step. Like, okay, the keyboard is giving too much. I can't be on the laptop. The trackpad is way too emanating. So I've got that shielded. And then, step by step, even like, for example, my mouse is um, grounded with an aluminium tape all around that does block a lot of the signal. And then I put a insulation plastic on it so I don't actually touch the aluminium itself. So I managed to bring down the RF from that, because all these little things, they add up really quickly. And if you start to tune into your body, it's funny how much you can pick up. Like, I just got a little voice recorder from Sony, where I thought, okay, maybe this is a way that I can start to creatively express again. Maybe I'll use my voice and set away the mobile phone, because I just can't, even though it's an amazing instrument, the Note phone, for drawing and for photographing, but the screen emanates so much. It's ridiculous. Even in flight mode, you have to put it away. It's just not really usable. I use it for a couple of minutes, but even the little dictaphone, it's intense. I mean, you mind if I just show it for a moment?
Yeah, sure. Love to. Go ahead.
See, it's been such a incredible step forward for me. Oh, sorry, Mike. Such an incredible step forward for me to get this German meter, which looks like some sort of dorky um, walkie-talkie, but it's actually a very fine ELF meter and also our RF meter. and I can even put like a little flicker diode on it. And that has helped me so much in being able to find what is going around in my environment. Because, of course I can feel something, but can you pinpoint it? It's we don't have senses for it. You can't just see what is emanating. You can't just, figure it out by feeling miserable. It's just like something is affecting me, and it could be that, and maybe if I touch it for long enough, but it's not a very nice way of figuring out what's going in your environment. Just it's like touching what is actually burning me. Okay, maybe if I hold it long, oh, I got blisters. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So having a meter is essential, and I've got multiple, probably not as amazing meters as you have, but I think these are sort of like the minimum viable, sensitive enough meters. Um, Hold on, I'll just do it.
Well, I'll just yak a little bit while you're doing
Yes.
that, and I just want to say that I really applaud your approach. You've obviously got technical skills and a good grasp of technology, and it just breaks my heart. I see so many people who become ill from wireless or one of the other electromagnetic phenomenon that might not always be from the wireless, maybe dirty electricity or magnetic fields or electric fields. And the real tragedy is that people talk about buying a meter, and they get, if you're going to get your first meter, maybe it should be an RF meter. That's fine. But then they never realize how much the overall synthetic radiation exposure is complemented by electric fields, magnetic fields, dirty electricity. So proper assessment is such a key thing. So have you got what you were looking for? I'll turn it back over to you.
Oh, yeah, no, no, and that's where I've learned a lot from you. Because in the beginning I was indeed very much focused on RF. And I actually I know you've got a quite a strong opinion about like the cheap meters, like the three-in-ones, like the tri-fields and the cornets. For me, it was actually a really good eye opener because I couldn't afford anything because, like I said, once you are sort of like dislocated from society, it becomes quite tough to make an income and to survive in that way. But I was living in a little cabin that had almost no reception, seemed to be like perfect for me. Yet I was still getting ill. I was still getting headaches, and I was at a point where I thought, oh, so maybe it isn't, technology in RF because I still got a headache. So, I've got everything switched off, even including the power to it. But uh, I, I, I finally decided to buy the cornet, and when it arrived, tack 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 tack. What is that? And I found that my Apple Pencil was actually emitting a Bluetooth signal. And once I got rid of that, that was when I realized, okay, I really have to have a meter. But a few years later, I've gotten so sensitive that even though the cornet would show you're safe, I would still get sick. And that's to your point, like it's not sensitive enough, not calibrated enough to actually protect you from being at that point where you're so sensitive that it hurts. But when I thought that I had all my RF all controlled, and this is like several years down the line, I had another episode where I was in new space and I was starting to get ill again, or sort of like I mean, ill again. It's. I mean, I would say it's a neurodegenerative state. It just gets worse and worse and worse if you're not addressing what is affecting you. So I was on that trajectory, and it was clear to me, like, okay, I've managed sometimes to slow it down by how I eat, my good habits, everything that I can do, but it's going down. And I didn't realize that my solar system inverter, was actually emanating
Oh, yeah. Hmm.
ELF fields because my beautiful new meter, the Safe and Sound Pro, which is amazing for RF, doesn't pick up on that. So I think I've done everything. I've shielded my space. I'm good. I'm fine. But I was still getting sick. And it was only when I got a little AM radio that I figured out, okay, this inverter is actually having a radius of 5 meters of just intense, dirty, gnarly pulsing. It, you know,
It is amazing.
funny thing is
It's
with
amazing how far those things are toxic, isn't it? The inverters.
I found nothing else. Like even if you have a grid extension cable, that's maybe 1, 2, 3 meters at max, but more like a meter around it. But this inverter was just blasting through the whole house, and I switch it on all every day. I would switch it off at night, but during the day it's all on because I had a gas stove that needed 240 volts to spark. So you're making yourself sick for that little bit of
Yeah.
convenience. I didn't notice that, and then once I got this meter, that is like an AM radio but super fine. It's like 1,000 New Zealand dollars, so probably 500-600 US, which was quite a big investment. But it has helped me in tracking down all the little sources. And if anything, what I learned from that visit to that rainbow gathering in that valley, the difference between low exposure, like I already had everything shielded, I already had everything out, I was doing really well, but being in a valley where there was nothing, like almost just only two AM radio stations, just barely to pick up the clarity that I got. It was like I was rediscovering myself. I didn't know that there was that last little bit made like 90% of my awareness and my sparkling and my being and my presence just come back. And from that moment I realized, well, I have to really pursue that last little bit. It's not enough to just bring it down to a low level, one that you can barely measure. No, barely measure is not good enough. It
Yeah,
really has to
exactly.
go down
Yeah.
to nothing.
Yeah, I was just doing some coaching for actually it was an EMF professional who's suffering earlier this week, and we were just talking about this exact phenomenon. In my case, the dysautonomia, this sympathetic parasympathetic imbalance that it had caused in me hypertensive crisis, and just being eternally prickly, like not fun to
Mm,
be around.
mm,
My cardiac dysrhythmia, my
yep,
insomnia, and 33 years of anxiety, diagnosis. All of that stuff didn't go away until I got down to 000. Like I'm talking
yeah,
about on a
yeah.
Safe and Sound Pro 2, 0.000 microwatts per square meter. And then it was like magic. And prior to that, I had been living in zero point 0.1. And you'd think zero
Yes.
point 0.1, whatever. My next door neighbor has 5,000. That's nothing. That's going to be the end of our society when people start saying, well, my house is a little bit better than that one. If what my experience is and your experience is that healing threshold is so close to zero on the best meters that we can find, yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So that's why I live here. Oh, this should be zero. So there's something
Yeah,
actually
don't
buzzing.
don't worry. I know what it is.
Yeah.
I've already been through this. It's the
Yes.
camera. It's the
Yeah,
camera.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I sat here. I wanted to take a picture of what the levels were in the house, and every time I got the meter set up and the proper depth of field, so you could see it was in a house, and everything was all set up, and I'd click the shutter, and it would jump up to like point zero point zero two instead of triple zeros, and I'm like,
Yeah,
what?
yeah.
Yeah, but anyway. So
Well,
you're living in quite a different environment that I would like to talk about, and there is something called off-grid living skills. So I had, oh gosh, maybe 9, 10 months ago now, somebody made me aware of an actual good place to live for somebody who's electrically sensitive. And I mean, I have people contact me all the time. Where do I find a place to live? it's not easy to find places that are in, a little wrinkle in the earth or whatever. This place was perfect, but it required off-grid living skills. And a lot of people don't even know, what does that mean? What are off-grid living
Mm.
skills? What are you even talking about? But can you speak about this a little bit? What does it mean to be able to live in a normal city environment and then also to have
Mm.
the ability to live in an off-grid environment?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, gosh, there's indeed so many things that are actually quite different from, let's say, normal life, but I don't really see that anymore because I've been living for quite a while this way. So, for example, I don't use a flush toilet, it is a humanure toilet, so a composting toilet. Water, for example, I don't
Okay,
have hot
let's slow
water.
down. Let's just slow down for a second, because all of this stuff is going to be brand new for most people.
Right, yes.
So the problem with fecal matter, if I can be indelicate here, is when it's combined with urine. That's when you get the real problem. So if you separate the fecal matter from the urine, then you don't have such an issue, and you can actually compost the solid waste. And it is not the mess you might think it is. Is that a good is that a good
Yeah,
summary? And
I mean,
the
there's a great book by I think Peter. Gosh, what is his name? Well, it's the Humanure Handbook. I think it's already on the fourth edition, and I actually built 28 toilets with a team for our festival. So we had like 1,500 people coming through for a 5-day festival. So there's a lot of poo and a lot of pee, and we put a lot of energy into separating those. But on a smaller scale, when you're having a bucket system where it's just a 1 or 2 person household, I really think you can get away quite easily with a mixture of pee and poo. It's just when it starts to become in sort of bigger quantities, yes, then the pee will actually make the poo smell bad. If you separate them, poo can just happily compost and become very fluffy and really quite quickly. Within a year, we've got these bins and it's just sort of, yeah, soil fluffy stuff. It's really very good. And the that book that I just mentioned, the Humanure Handbook, of the 300 pages, about 200 pages is about showing all the examples of how it breaks down pathogens, how it breaks down, how it binds heavy metals into soil. It's a very, very safe way, better than what we're actually doing with flushing and then treating the sludge and dealing with that kind of stuff. It is the way that we need to reintegrate our food back into the cycle.
Yeah, and one of the reasons it's important to talk about as an off-grid living skill is, if you can manage things differently, it opens up other possibilities. So, for example, I think I was telling you about, did I tell you about my son and his tiny house, the shielded tiny house?
Oh
But,
no.
oh, okay. One time we'll have to talk about that in detail. It's really quite a fascinating story. But um, if you have ordinary plumbing, then four-season climates become problematic because you need to keep the supply line uh, from freezing, and
Mm,
the waistline from freezing. So off-grid living skills, what they do is, I mean, they may save the world, but for people who are sensitive, it opens up possibilities that didn't exist before. So I don't want this to be a whole tutorial in humanure, but I don't know.
sorry.
I've never taught. No, it's not your fault.
It's a
It's
passion
mine.
project.
I took the car and I drove it over into this area because I meet so few people I can talk to about some of these living skills that open up better living better living opportunities for people who are in dire need. So yeah, and I interrupted you. So you mentioned that, and then you were going on to the next thing, and I interrupted you. So go ahead. You back to talking about off grid living skills.
Well, maybe that's not so much a skill, but accepting like I don't have heated water here, so I start my mornings with a cold shower and just a hose. Um, and
And it doesn't kill you.
it actually is something I need. Often I feel I still get a bit of pressure on my head, and maybe if I have been exposed a bit, like maybe I'm on a computer for a little bit too much, I do still get that. And the only way that I really can reset myself is in the morning is by having that cold splash. It really does wonders. It's probably also the combination with being standing on the ground on the grass outside and really grounding myself and having a good cold shower.
Yeah.
I'm keen to do a bit more breath exercises with that too, but the cold shower really helps. I wouldn't want it any other way. I mean, I run through the forest also and go into the ocean, dip there in the winter, and it's been pretty cold, but even though you dread the idea once you do it, it's amazing. And I've gotten so
you're
much
warmer
hardier.
after. Yeah, you're warmer
Yeah,
afterwards, right?
yeah, yeah. No, I feel a lot better. The first month or two, I thought, oh gosh, this is so miserable. But now I'm actually really quite good with it. Still, once you get cold down to the bone, then maybe you have to remediate, get a little hot water bottle. I think a lot of it for me, this off-grid living, it's more sort of a way of nimble living, to do with a lot less. Like my solar system is only 100 amp lithium battery, yet I have a sound system and computer and internet and lights. But I do not have a fridge. I do not have whatever any big electric appliances. So for me, the notion of people having to translate their normal life and then when they go sort of off grid then having to recreate that same capacity of 5 kilowatts, 10, 20 kilowatts, the bigger it is, then you're sort of missing missing out on the option of doing with not just a little bit less, 20% less, 30, no, doing maybe with 5% or with 2% of what a normal life is, and still have that abundance and still have a joyful and basically comfortable life.
Yeah. When my family and I moved off grid, we I'm a nerd, so I actually looked at how much energy we were using when we were on the grid. And then I knew exactly when you move off grid, believe me, you know how much power you're using. And we went from, well, we reduced our need for electricity by 96% when we went off grid. And we weren't doing, we were doing normal flush toilets. We had hot water heaters. We had, we had refrigeration and freezers, but we did things differently.
Mm.
So in the winter, we had an outdoor box that served as a refrigerator. And instead of chilling it, we would put a bottle of hot water in it at night, so the food didn't freeze. And we had a cook stove. It was a big, beautiful wood cook stove that had
Mm.
a passive heat exchanger in it, and this great big tank filled with water next to it. So we had hot water for free during the winter. And then it was, of course, it had an oven and a stove top to it, so you could have heat for your home, and you could have an oven, and you could have a stove, and you could have hot water all from this one device. And then we had redundant systems, so like we also had propane heat if we wanted that, and we had a normal gas stove, propane stove and oven. So when we needed that convenience, but it's just it's about having the flexibility to do things differently that can open up huge possibilities for people who are electrically sensitive. So I'll kind of leave it there, unless you have any last words on off-grid living skills. But I just wanted to touch on that because I don't get to talk to a lot of people who are, it's sort of like being able to drive an automatic transmission and a manual. Some people don't have that ability to switch. Same thing with living skills, on grid versus off grid. It can be very versatile. So, do you have any
Mm.
last comments about off grid living and what that opens up?
Well, I was wondering if you want to talk about the 12-volt system, but by the way, we call those passive heat exchangers in New Zealand, call them wetbacks, and they're quite popular. And that is my aim also for here. Previous place I was living with that, and yeah, that is the way to go. It's amazing. Actually, I have a friend who's a real inventor genius. He is managing to do really capturing solar with a big parabolic mirror antenna. He's got a hot tub that is heated by the sun. Little ovens that are all just 12 volt, or not 12 volt, like 200-volt DC. Amazing stuff that he's doing with that. And it can have a hot, long shower, endless long, hot shower there, basically, without any guilt because it's just heated up by the sun and you're not burning up anything or consuming or the water just comes in and goes out and it continues its travel. In the meantime, you just had a spot of warmth and luxury with a view outside. So yes, it's primitive. Maybe it is jarring to be away from what you perceive as the comfort from Netflix and the bags of chips and the thermostat heating, but the vibrancy and fullness that comes with off grid is is just absolutely joyful. And this kind of sort of suffering, if you would call it suffering, is well worth not having migraines, not being buzzed out by AC electric lines. And at this point, I just have to choose for my health and my well-being. And I don't know. People are saying I'm looking better, so I must be
Yeah,
doing something right in that field.
yeah, yeah. And neither one of us would be able to have this conversation for this long if we were in the burn, so to speak,
Yeah.
out in the RF radiation exposures and other exposures. So that's the other thing is people imagine that they're giving some, they would have to give something up, but it's not really that way. When I talk to people who have had to make great sacrifices, I'll ask them, if you could, would you go back? And I've yet to have somebody tell me, yes, I would definitely go back. What is your thought? I mean, if you could, would you go back to a life of those exposures?
I mean, I'm getting a visceral body reaction of like, absolutely no, no. There's things that I miss. I come from Amsterdam. I love the connection and the city life. But it's the same with that. If I see Amsterdam, it's all tiled and there's little pockets of nature like in parks. But would give up being actually with my bare feet in the grass outside in the sun? Like I daily have like an hour or 2 hours of being nude in the sun. It's like, well, can't do that in the city, right? And this is just bliss beyond. So no, I wouldn't go back.
Yeah, yeah. I uh, I definitely feel the same way, and you know, because you and I need to have a natural environment, and we don't do well with the poisonous environment that's being created, we're going to be spared from whatever the long term effects are going to be um, of that. And it is interesting for me to think about things like the term brain fog, which I don't know, is that a
Mhm.
terminology in New Zealand, brain fog?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because when I was a kid, that was not a thing. That term wasn't in use. That was invented sometime after cell phones were invented. My point being, of course, that everybody in today's society can't sleep. Everybody is anxious. everybody is unable to think, and they say, "Oh, I just had brain fog." So
Mm.
yeah, it is possible to have a much more abundant life, even though the cost of admission is to learn some new skills and do things a little bit differently. So I'd be interested in if you want to expand on that just at all, or shall we move on?
Yeah, I mean there's something that I noticed, like, because I moved to New Zealand from Holland, so I've got two groups of friends. I've got my Dutch friends and I've got my New Zealand friends. And the difference in the reception about being sensitized to these forms of radiation falls on complete deaf ears in Holland. I mean, it's changing the last maybe 2, 3 years, but 12 years ago, it was absolutely none of them basically believed it. They were all just not buying into it. And the New Zealand people, much more. There's a lot bigger chance of meeting somebody who actually can understand it, or as in lately, a lot more people that actually are feeling it or are truly physically becoming aware of it. And I think the big difference between those two is not just a mental approach or how, because Dutch are quite, scientific and like proof and no nonsense. And I have the same, sort of skeptical nature, and it's a good one. But I think the big difference is that they are in it all the time. It's almost impossible to escape radiation in Holland. It's flat, it's everywhere. We're technologically advanced. You're in the soup. But here in New Zealand, there's a chance people actually have a place where a batch where they're somewhere out of reach, or they go camping, or they go on a hike. So they are more aware of the contrast. Like, you know what? I do feel buzzy and agitated when I'm in the city. And in the beginning, it was more where people say, "Oh, it's just because there's so many people." It's like, but now they're starting to realize, yeah, no, there's actually a physical difference that I'm experiencing between that. And because they're aware of that contrast, we can have this conversation. When I explain how I see it and what I'm experiencing, what I've learned through the years, they were much easier in picking it up. With my Dutch friends, it's still sort of like, are you sure? Where's the proof? Where's the evidence? It's like it's a less visceral kind of thing. And even though if I give a proof and here's are these and these and these studies, well, then we're just talking words, and it becomes a lot harder to actually share in what it is that we're trying to what we're trying to share here.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think it's a mental image for me is if you and I went to a big city and we walked down the back alleys and we approached people who were heroin addicts, and we said, "Hey, did you know that that's not good for you?"
yeah,
Probably.
yeah, yeah. No, no, absolutely.
So
Heroin,
everybody's doing
cigarettes,
this,
this, yeah, yeah.
and consciously or subconsciously they don't want to give it up. And one item of proof is that these ridiculous harmonizers or chips or pendants or all of these things, they're starting to sell really well.
Yeah, I've
And of
noticed.
course, of course they don't work. Well, I'll get your feeling. I don't think they work, but I'll get your feeling in a moment. But the great news is it demonstrates that people understand there's a problem. And
Mm,
beyond that, it means that people are actually going a step further and doing something about it. And I would say what they're doing about it is not addressing anything, but it's the beginning of awareness. Maybe anyway. Your thought on harmonizers, has that been any part of your journey? Has it helped you? Do you use
mm.
them? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's a tricky one because I've gotten quite desperate at times where I've been trying to find a solution because it's not a fun way of life, and I'm skeptical, but I'm also very open in trying to find and try different things, and it's the thing that people bring forward. Have you tried this pendant? Have you tried orgonite? Have you tried this harmonizer? Because that's what they see. And so I've got sent a few things. Like, people have been really kind in allowing me to try out, because maybe it'll work. But no, no, I'm totally there with you that it doesn't work. So that got me thinking, like, well, why are there so many people then in my EHS groups that are swearing that it does work? Doesn't make sense, because that's what got me, still keeping an open mind for many years now. Like, well, there's clearly people that are suffering from radiation, and they say they are getting benefit from. They're quite adamant about it. But if you look at it from that, how did you call that with the vagal?
Prophylactic or
No, where we get into fight or flight. It's the sympathetic nervous system, where when that gets into a runaway situation,
yeah,
there's like a
dis
protocol of Dr.
dysautonomia.
Right. And because
Yeah,
I've been starting with that, with an amygdala training, which is basically trying to stop the runaway reaction of the body. Yes, I'm sensitive to stuff, but my nervous system is hypersensitized. Like, any indication of, oh my God, we don't want to get back into that migraine state. We don't want to get there. So any little thing will set it up into that state, which in itself then feeds the system and puts you in a more even more of that state. So you got to sort of try and bring that down, so that the nervous system doesn't run away. Yes, it registers, but your conscious mind tells it, like, yes, it's there, but it's not dangerous, or not to that level that you feel it is. You can chill. And I think that these harmonizers are like an instant effect for people to calm their nervous system. So yes, it is having an effect, a physiological effect, because it's not just in the mental, it's actually your nervous system that is reacting to it. Still, it doesn't take away that there's harmful radiations coming to you, and on a cellular level, you're still being affected. But overall, you're not on a runaway train. So I can see why they work. And then by saying this, and if you acknowledge that, then that effect gets nullified, of course, because if if you don't believe in them, I don't think that they will have that effect. So what would be your take on that?
I think I saw a study that showed that even when people knew it was a placebo, that there still was an effect, and the placebo
Interesting.
effect is like 30%. And if the placebo is a plain white tablet, for example, you'll get a better effect from a fancy colored tablet,
Mm.
and you'll get the best effect from an injection that's like saline, just salt water basically, because sort of the fancier it is. But listen, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a doctor, and I don't really go down those areas. I will mention I had a great chat with Sheena Symington. She's a director of the Electro-Sensitive Society up in Canada, and she was talking about auricular chromotherapy, and that is a light-based therapy where
Mm.
they're shining light on a certain portion of the ear, and it takes just minutes, and the success rate is over 90%, which is way better that's 3 times better than a placebo. But I'll give you any final thoughts, and then we're gonna move to end this, because otherwise we'll never get people watching a long. We might have to do this again. We still have more to talk about, but yeah.
It feels
Anything?
that way, yeah. Mm.
Yeah. Anything you want to talk about we haven't touched on?
No, like you said, it is a very wide, and there's a lot to talk about, and I'd love to, at some point, maybe share some better ways that I found to be able to work with technology. But um I think this was yeah, this feels feels pretty good to me.
And an abundant life is still possible, even when you have to take drastic measures to reduce exposure. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. I'm fully embracing this nimble way of living. I even even if I would have figured it all out, I still want to go down this path. It feels good. It feels in harmony with nature. It feels more in harmony with myself. And yeah, if I can be around more people, that would be nice. And that means, can we please switch off or leave the phones behind? It's like that unconscious, but it sounds so judgmental, unconscious behavior. But yeah, I really would love to be around people without their phones. That that would be that would be pretty nice.
Wouldn't that be wonderful? That would be so wonderful. We need challenge facilities. Maybe that's the last thing I'll say, which is
Mm,
an
mm.
exclusion diet. It's like when you take wheat out of your diet and you suddenly feel wonderful. We need facilities where you can take um, synthetic electromagnetic energy out of the diet and see what happens to people. So, my latest vision, I don't think I've talked to you about this, is like a tiny house village with shielded tiny houses and communal living spaces with, shielded, protected outdoor activities and things like that. Maybe we'll talk about that next time we get together. Daniel, is there
Absolutely, because that's actually what we're aiming for here. This is the community where I'm living is going through a restart phase, and our aim is to have little tiny houses, exactly what you're saying, and our focus is on healthy living, healthy air, no EMF, and just making it back to the basics in a way and letting people experience it, because you have to experience it for yourself to recognize, like, oh, this is actually really, really nice.
I'll tell you
We
what,
need
why
to
don't
experience
why don't you
it.
get that set up and then I'll promote it over here and we can send people down there for a 1 month, because you said nobody should spend less than a month in New Zealand. And then I'll just have to break it to my wife why we need to move to New Zealand. But Daniel, do you have a way that people can get in touch with you? I think you need to think about a future career in helping people with EMF
Mm.
oriented issues. You've really learned a lot. You've got some great technical skills and whatnot. But is there a way people can be exposed to your work or get in touch with you?
Yeah, I mean, the easiest is through Telegram, t.me at Vask or slash Vasku, or my you can just email me. Probably EMF at vasku.com is a good way to just send me an email.
All right, sounds great. Daniel, I am so excited that we were able to get this conversation recorded here, and looking forward to next time we're able to get together. Thanks for your time.
Awesome. Thank you.
The EMF Remedy podcast is a project of EMF Remedy LLC. We'd like to be your trusted guide for achieving a better EMF environment in your home. The contents on this podcast are provided for informational purposes only and are not intended to substitute for the advice provided by your doctor or other healthcare professional. It is not intended to be, nor does it constitute healthcare or medical advice. Opinions of guests on this podcast do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the EMF Remedy podcast.